In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 3 different kind of turnover thresholds that you need to be aware of as a micro entrepreneur. What are you talking about? Never heard about this. So there's 3 things that you need to be aware of when you run your business. First of all is what is the VAT threshold above which will become VAT registered. The second one is what is the maximum turnover threshold that you can have over a year. What is the maximum turnover you can invoice over a year for your first year in business and afterward. And the third one that not many people know about is something called the Prorata temporise. Keep the surprise for you. So first of all, let's look at the VAT threshold. When you start your activity as a micro-entrepreneur, you are not VAT registered. It's called en franchise de TVA, which means you are not charging any VAT, you're not collecting any VAT, and if you have some VAT that you pay in your expenses, you can't deduct it. So the first rule that you need to be aware of is that for your first year in business, you will become VAT registered when you go above the threshold I'm going to be telling you. If you're providing some services, whether they're manual or intellectual as profession libérale, when you go above 34,400 euros for your first year in business, you become VAT registered. If you're buying to resell, you have an e-commerce, you have a gîte, you have a food store, and you go above 85,800 euros, you will become VAT registered. Now, if you are in your second year in business, there's actually a slight leeway. The tax office is telling you, well, your second year in business, if you're between these 2 numbers, you're okay. But as soon as you go above, that's when you will become VAT registered. So for your second year in business, and we are talking about calendar year, once you go above 36,500 for services, and once you go above 94,400 euros for buy to resell e-commerce gîtes, once you go above that, that's when you will become VAT registered. So basically, first year in business, there's no leeway. It's 34,400 for services, 85,800 for buy to resell trade gîte. But for your second year, you can go up to 36,500 up to 94,300. They basically say, oh, watch out, you're a bit naughty, but if you don't go above, that's fine, you can still remain like this. If you go above, 1 euro above, then you have to become VAT registered. So here's my advice. You have to prepare this ahead of time. You don't want to find out at the last minute, because basically when you become VAT registered, you will have to request your VAT number from the tax office, impôt, and you will also have to choose a VAT regime. So it's best to have time to get some information and know what the different VAT regimes are, so you can choose the best one for you. And you might want to speak to an accountant to choose and maybe to help you if you don't want to handle the VAT. Now here's my feedback. Becoming VAT registered is not necessarily a bad thing. Some people think, oh no, that's going to be too much. I don't want to be dealing with this. I want to keep my business simple. The fact that you go over the VAT threshold means that your turnover is significantly going higher. So that's a plus. I'll talk about the maximum turnover threshold in my second point. So first of all, it's not necessarily bad, and especially if you're working B2B, business to business, that's the easiest one, because basically your customers are also businesses. They are used to pay VAT. They're also collecting VAT. So the fact that your business is becoming VAT registered has pretty much a neutral impact for them. So for you, it's an easy way to straight away go to the highest level of turnover without too much work. You still plan for it, but there isn't much work. It's different when you're working B2C, business to consumer, when you're selling to the end consumer. Your prices are going to increase because they can't claim the VAT back. So either you decide to increase your prices, either you reduce your margin. So there's some planification to do here as to what is going to be your strategy. And also, if you sell some e-commerce, it can be more tricky if you sell abroad, because the VAT rate that applies is where your customer is based. So if you sell in Ireland or in Germany, you'll have to collect the VAT rate and sort it out. So it's definitely more complex. For that type of business, I would strongly suggest that you choose an accountancy software and a payment gateway that is going to include the local VAT, so you don't have to worry about it. So that means planning ahead. Now, if you just realize, oh my word, I've just gone over the TVA threshold without realizing, or you're just about to go above, you can book a power hour with me. There'll be a link below the video and we can talk about how to deal with it. Now, the second turnover threshold I wanted to talk to you about is the maximum turnover that you can invoice as a micro-entrepreneur, which means that above that, you are coming out of the micro-entrepreneur regime. So, to summarize, the maximum turnover that you can invoice as a micro-entrepreneur varies for your first business, and then afterwards. It's very French to say, watch out, first year there's a number, and then there's another rule for the second year. So basically, for your first year in business, the maximum turnover that you can invoice for services is 72,600. And for buy to resell, e-commerce, shops, food, GEETS is 176 and 200 euros. So I'm talking without VAT or tax. At that stage, you have become VAT registered. So that's before the VAT that we're talking about in business. We always talk about hors tax because the VAT, you're collecting it, but it's not yours. So here, the reference to those numbers is the maximum that you can invoice without VAT, which means that basically, if your customers are in France, you can add 20% on top. Now, so that's for your first year in business. If you go above that, it means that the following year, you will be switched to a different regime. It's called régime réel simplifié when you are taxed on your profit. So here's my warning to you. This threshold is for a full year. And I'll explain in a moment the Prorata rule. That's my third point. That's for a full year, 360 days in business. If you spend less than that in business, the threshold will be lower. And what most people know is that actually, once you're in your second year in business, the rule changes. It's more flexible. You can go way above that maximum turnover threshold. So when I'm talking about second year in business, let's say I register my business in 2022. We're talking about calendar year for the micro-entrepreneur. So January to December, if I create my business in 2022, my first year in business is 2022. And 1st of Jan 2023, it's a brand new year. So basically, it would mean that 2022 have a maximum turnover threshold. But from 2023, if I want to, I can go way above the maximum turnover threshold. And basically, the rule for micro-entrepreneurs is that you can go above the maximum turnover threshold for 2 consecutive years before having to come out of the micro-entrepreneur or being switched to the régime réel simplifié. So if I give you an example, I'm going to talk about business providing services registered on the 1st of Jan 2022. I'm doing it on purpose here to have a full year because I don't want to look at that Prorata rule for now. So my business is created 1st of Jan 2022, let's say as a programmer. This year, my turnover, and I'm talking without VAT, so hors tax, is 45,000 euros. I'm fine. I'm way below the 72,000 euros. 2023, my turnover is 85,000 euros. I've gone above the 72,000 threshold. 2024, my turnover is 98,000 euros. Again, this year I've gone over the turnover threshold, which means on the 1st of Jan 2025, this is when I will come out of the micro-entrepreneur. So when I say coming out of the micro-entrepreneur, if I do nothing, basically, URSSAF is just going to switch my regime. They're going to say, okay, you've gone over that 2 consecutive rules of going over the turnover threshold. So from the 1st of Jan, you are switched to what we call régime réel simplifié. You're still a sole trader, entreprise individuelle, but your taxes, rather than being based on a fixed percentage of your turnover like your micro-entrepreneur, from now on, your taxes will be based on your profit. And with that regime, you need an accountant, you need the full accountancy. So again, it's something that you prepare. As you go like this, you could say, well, I just want to remain macro-entrepreneur for those 2 years. And basically towards the end of 2024, you would book a call with me or with an accountant. And you say, okay, what do I want to move to next time? Do I want to go to that réel simplifié? Or does it make sense for me at that time to move to a French incorporated business to pay less taxes? So that's how we would go about it. So if you want to, if that's your situation, you can see you're going to come out of the micro-entrepreneur soon or next year, then you can book a power hour with me so we can talk about the different options that you would have and how much it would cost you in terms of taxes. So the last turnover threshold I wanted to talk to you is the Prorata temporis rule. Prorata temporis rule. So we're going into Latin now for business. Basically, this rule, most micro-entrepreneurs don't know about it, And unfortunately, because they don't know about it, they might come out of the macro entrepreneur without realizing it, which means January, Feb, next year, yourself is going to say, oops, by the way, you've changed regime, you worse taxes, that's how it works. And that's not great. So, Valerie, what do you mean by prorata temporis? Basically, the prorata temporis means that the turnover threshold that we talked about so far, the maximum turnover that you can invoice for a full year, is literally for a full year, for 365 days. If you are in business for half of the year, you're going to have half that allowance in terms of turnover. So you want to know what is the maximum turnover that you can invoice for your first calendar year in business. For my macro entrepreneurs, what I call my macro entrepreneurs is the macro entrepreneurs that register as part of the fact sheet that I give them with a business registration. I actually indicate the maximum amount that they can invoice this year if they don't want to come out of the macro entrepreneur. So how does it work? Basically, you know that for your turnover for your first year in business is appreciated in the exact number of days that you are in business, and that the overall allowance, for instance, let's say for somebody providing services for maximum 72,600, if I register halfway through the year, I just have half that amount that I can invoice. So here's my advice. Again, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, that prorata rule, as long as you know what that number is. You write it down somewhere, and if you think, well, macro entrepreneur works fine for me, I like the simplicity, I like to pay my taxes as I go along, I want to remain like this for a couple of years while I grow my business. So the thing is, find out what the number is and write it down. And my other advice is also, if you're getting close to that number towards the end of the year, you might just want to postpone an invoice until the 1st of Jan. So let's say I'm getting close to the 1st of December and I can see I'm getting very close to the turnover threshold. I can only invoice 500 euros. I might wait until the 1st of Jan to send my invoice, so that this year I'm still within the allowance that I'm given. And at least next year, it's my second year in business, I can go way above the turnover that is given. So that's kind of a strategic decision to remain under the regime that suits you. You've seen which were the key 3 turnover thresholds that you want to keep an eye on for your micro entrepreneur. It's your VAT threshold, your maximum turnover for year 1 and after, and the prorata temporise turnover. So let me know in the comment if you knew about this, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to be aware when there's a new video being published on how to create and manage a French business.